The cavern lights buzzed faintly above, a steady, low drone that filled the void between murmurs and echoed commands. It had become mere background murmuring to most of the crew, but for me, it always felt like pressure, like the tightening coil inside my chest when I tried not to overthink, not to drown in sensation. The leader's bark finally sliced through the stillness. "Wrap it up. Time's done." We'd been rehearsing battle drills for what felt like an age, and every fiber in my being throbbed like I'd been twisted inside out and hung to dry. I feigned a stretch while the others exulted in freedom, tossing their gear aside, patting each other's backs, laughing like the world had never cracked their armor. I kept silent, as always. I hovered near the fringe of the group just as I always skirted the edges of everything. Being unseen was simpler, quieter, safer. "Hey, Jace," one of them called as he passed by, grinning wide. "You gonna quit dancing around and actually land a hit next time?" Another voice cut sharper, louder. "That one's got the grace of a poet, not a fighter." Laughter followed, more and more, not directed at me, at least not openly, just echoing over and around me. It wasn't the first time. I said nothing, forced a brittle smile, and kept moving. My boots scraped the stone floor as I drifted toward the locker chamber, lagging behind the pack. I felt the tightening in my throat, the sting behind my eyelids welling before I even reached the door. I bit the inside of my cheek to hold it back, pressing my lips so hard they went numb. Inside the chamber, the air was thick and stale, a blend of sweat, old cloth, and worn leather that seemed almost tangible. The squad poured in around me, still loud, still alive in ways I couldn't grasp. I moved fast, grabbing my satchel, ducking my head, pretending to rummage through my cubby just to stall the inevitable moment. I didn't want to return home. I didn't want to go anywhere at all. One by one, the others trickled out. The laughter faded. The water stopped flowing in the ancient pipes. The room emptied, and I remained, seated on the rough bench, staring into the dark hollow of my locker as if it might suddenly offer a solution. I didn't know what shattered me, maybe the silence, maybe the stillness thickening the air, or maybe the 100 other weights I'd forced down all week, all year. I bowed my head, elbows resting on knees, and the tears came without warning. Sharp, sudden, ruthless. No sobs at first, just wetness, trembling. I told myself I'd cry for 5 breaths, maybe 10, then pull myself together and leave. But I couldn't. My body just stayed folded in on itself, shaking like a hunted creature. The truth was, I wasn't crying because of their words. Not really. I was weeping for all the things they never knew about me, everything I'd stuffed deep just to survive the drills, the chamber, to avoid someone staring too long, seeing what I tried so hard to mask. I didn't hate myself. Not anymore. I was just exhausted. Exhausted from fear. Exhausted from invisibility. The creak of the door opening made my chest tighten like a stone dropped inside. Footsteps. Sharp. Heavy. Familiar. Damn. I wiped my face fast and rough, swiping my sleeve over my eyes, trying to straighten up. I turned, slightly toward the wall, pretending to search through my satchel. My breath was shallow, uneven. I couldn't bring myself to look up. The footsteps drew closer, then paused. Right beside me, I dared not move. My skin prickled as if caught in a misstep. From the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow shift, then a figure lower onto the bench next to me, not touching, just near. The leader. My stomach flipped. A dozen excuses collided in my mind. Say I wasn't. Feeling well. Claim a shard in my eye. Anything but the truth. But he said nothing. No clearing of throat, no awkward words, no probing questions. He just sat there. The silence between us was dense but not uncomfortable. Not like I feared. It didn't feel like he was waiting for me to explain or fix myself. It felt like he was waiting with me. Like he wasn't afraid of the quiet. I kept my gaze lowered, fists clenched in my lap, eyes burning though all the tears had spilled out. Part of me wanted him gone. The larger part wanted him to stay, to say anything or maybe nothing at all. I could feel his steady presence beside me, grounded, calm, unwavering, no judgment, no flight, just there. And that meant more than I could hold in that moment. I didn't want him to see me this way, but he didn't look away. We stayed like that a long while, unmoving. My breathing shallow, like even drawing air had become a task earned. I couldn't meet his eyes, but I felt him there, steady, unmoving. The silence wasn't harsh. It didn't pressure me to speak or explain or make myself less broken. It simply was, gentle and strange. It might have been easier if he'd said something foolish, told me to toughen up or asked what was wrong or pretended he hadn't noticed my collapse. But he didn't. He just stayed. Like he knew sometimes being present meant more than any words. Eventually, I exhaled, shaky but soft. Not a surrender exactly, more a quiet yielding. My fists unclenched. My palms were damp. The leader shifted. Beside me, not closer, not away, just adjusting to settle on the hard bench. A small movement, but it felt monumental, like he wasn't planning to leave anytime soon. "I recognize it," he murmured softly. His voice caught me off guard, not because it broke the quiet, but because it carried a gentleness I hadn't heard before. Not the loud, commanding voice he used to rally the team. This one was deeper, more composed. "I notice how you bear it, whatever burden that may be." I kept my gaze fixed on the distant wall, my vision tracing the lines of lockers far across the room. A tightness gripped my throat, like a fragile dam straining against a flood of old, unspoken fears. "You've been carrying that weight too long," he said quietly. I gave a slight nod, just once. That was all I could offer. He didn't press for more. Instead, he settled back against the cold metal, exhaling with a slow heaviness, as if releasing a burden he'd long carried himself. "You know," he began after a pause, "when I was your age, I thought silence was safety." I glanced sideways, catching the outline of his face. He wasn't meeting my eyes. His gaze was fixed downward, brows furrowed as if recalling a distant scene. I believed that keeping quiet, staying under the radar, working hard, blending in, would shield me from the weight of it all. He shook his head softly, a rueful smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I wasn't invisible," he admitted, "just utterly alone." There was something in his tone, no regret exactly, but a depth I recognized, something profoundly familiar. I swallowed, words gathering on my tongue but vanishing before they could be spoken. He rubbed his hands together slowly. "I don't fully understand what you're facing. Not precisely, but I see the signs." I finally broke the silence, voice rough. "What signs?" "The kind of exhaustion that sleep can't fix. The act of pretending you're fine until you're by yourself and realize you're not. The way you laugh off pain just to keep it hidden." I looked down, eyes burning anew. He didn't press. No flood of tales or shallow advice followed. Instead, he leaned forward slightly and rested his hand on the bench between us. Not touching me, just placing an open palm on the wood. It wasn't an invitation, but a quiet acceptance. I stared at his hand, strong, worn fingers spread slightly, marked by years of labor and endurance. Solid, steady. And then I felt it, a subtle shift within me. Something uncoiling. Something tender. I hadn't realized how long I'd been holding my breath until that moment. My chest expanded deeper, freer. I didn't reach for his hand. I stayed still. But I didn't pull away either. For a while, we remained like that, two souls sharing a silence more truthful than any words spoken aloud. He didn't demand my secrets. He didn't ask me to make sense of my pain. He didn't expect me to be anything other than what I was, fearful, aching, uncertain. And in that quiet space, I experienced something rare and precious. Acknowledged, not judged, not scrutinized, simply acknowledged. He never asked me to explain. He simply made it easier to breathe. The days that followed that evening felt altered. Not because anyone had noticed, not because anything on the surface had shifted, but because I had. Something inside me had cracked wide open. And for the first time in ages, I didn't rush to close it back up. Coach never mentioned it. Not a single time. Not directly, but he didn't pretend it wasn't there either. The following day during practice, when I ran a flawless route and caught the ball just right, he gave me the tiniest nod, almost imperceptible, but it shone like a beacon through the mist. After that, I started picking up on how he checked on me. Small gestures, a hand on my shoulder that lingered slightly longer than usual, a quick glance across the field when I looked lost, a soft, "You all right?" when no one else was around. I rarely replied, sometimes just a quiet nod. But each time, it felt like he was tossing me a lifeline. No pressure, no demands, just letting me know it was there if I wanted it. I didn't share a word with anyone else. Not about what happened. Not about how I felt. Not even about the weight that was slowly, almost imperceptibly, lifting from my chest. But I found myself lingering after practice more often, stretching alone when everyone else had left, sitting quietly on the stands while he packed away cones and scribbled notes on his clipboard. Sometimes we didn't speak at all, just sat side by side. The silence no longer felt daunting. It became its own form of communication, one that asked for nothing and gave space instead. Then there was that night I remember best. It was after a brutal practice, the kind where everyone dragged, tempers flared, and Coach's voice was sharper than usual. I'd gotten into a heated exchange with a teammate. Nothing serious, just frustration, but it rattled me. I stayed behind, hands shaking as I rolled my ankle out on the mat. Coach was gathering equipment. He glanced my way, but said nothing, until I broke the silence. "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" The question slipped out suddenly, surprising even myself. My voice cracked slightly. He turned slowly toward me. "What do you mean?" I hesitated. Then, "Like, pretending everything's fine, pretending you don't care, pretending you're not falling apart inside." He didn't respond immediately, just came over, sat down a few feet away, and exhaled deeply. "All the time," he said quietly. I looked at him, really looked, and saw it, the lines around his eyes, the way he carried himself like he wore armor beneath his skin. He met my gaze, expression unreadable. "You don't have to be strong all the time, you know." That simple, gentle phrase hit me harder than anything else. I stared at the floor, my breath caught, my chest tightened. "I think I'm gay," I whispered. It wasn't loud, it wasn't triumphant. It wasn't a victory. It felt like the first breath after holding it in too long. The space between us fell silent. He didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't react the way I feared. He just let the words hang there, as if they belonged. Then he said it. "Okay, just that, no. Are you sure? No, don't tell anyone. No, it's just a phase, just..." "Okay," and somehow that was everything. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt a tear slide down my wrist. I wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. But Coach didn't look away. He wasn't uncomfortable. He just sat there. With me. In it. "I've never said that out loud before," I admitted, voice rough. "Not to anyone." "You have now." I chuckled, just slightly. It slipped out like a fracture forming in frozen water. That's all? He gave a gentle smile. What were you expecting? Fireworks? I shook my head. I'm not sure. I thought maybe it would feel monumental. It is monumental, he replied, but not because of the change it brings, because of what it signifies. What does it signify? He looked at me, composed and confident. That you've stopped faking it. I let those words linger. We didn't speak much after that. There was no need. When we eventually rose to go, I felt lighter. Not because the burden vanished, but because I was no longer carrying it alone. For the first time, that felt sufficient. After I said it, after I admitted I think I'm attracted to the same gender, and he simply said, okay, everything shifted. And yet nothing did. No proclamations, no long midnight text exchanges, no deep discussions about the meaning. But there was a subtle change, gradual and steady, like the ground beneath me had firmed up just a bit. The coach didn't treat me differently, not during practice, not in drills. He still shouted orders, still told me to pick up my lazy feet when I fell behind during sprints. But in the quiet intervals, after training, before team talks, those brief moments in the hallway, there was something else between us. A gentleness, a steadiness, an unspoken bond forged in silence. He didn't press me for explanations. I didn't ask what he thought, but we kept meeting in the spaces between words. One morning, he sent me a simple text. You awake? Run? I stared at my phone for a moment, surprised, before replying, yeah. Where? We met outside the school just before dawn. The track was slick with dew, the sky softly shifting from night to early morning blue. Neither of us said much. We stretched, nodded, then started running. I hadn't realized how much I needed it. The crisp air filling my lungs, the rhythm of our feet pounding together, the feeling of moving without sound or expectation. No pressure. Just breath. Just flow. After several laps, we slowed to a walk. He handed me a water bottle and gestured toward a bench near the far end of the field. We sat, steam rising from our bodies in the cool morning air. I used to run with someone, he said after a moment. I glanced over. He wasn't looking at me, just gazing toward the horizon. In college. His name was Mason. The name dropped softly between us. He was my roommate, my closest friend. We did everything side by side, late-night drives, early morning workouts, marathon study sessions. I think everyone knew, even if we didn't say it. I said nothing. His voice carried the weight of what was left unsaid. One night he kissed me. The coach continued quietly. I kissed him back. Then I panicked. He paused. A long silence. I told him it was a mistake, that it couldn't happen again, that we'd ruin everything. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. He left 2 weeks later, he finished. Transferred out. I never saw him again. The silence that followed was not awkward. It was reverent, as if we were sitting inside a memory too fragile to disturb. I didn't mean to hurt him, he said, finally turning to look at me. I just didn't know how to allow myself to want something I wasn't supposed to want. I nodded slowly. I think about that too. What I might lose if I stay afraid. He gave a quiet laugh, not amused, more resigned. You're all ready. Braver than I ever was. That didn't feel true. I still felt like a child fumbling through an unmapped world, but something in his tone made me sit a little straighter. We didn't say much after that. Just sipped coffee and watched the sunrise, golden light crawling up the stands and warming the track. And then it happened. Our hands, resting on the bench between us, brushed, lightly, almost nothing, but neither of us pulled away. That tiny touch felt louder than any kiss, any confession. It hummed between us, a live wire buzzing just beneath the skin. He didn't meet my gaze. I didn't meet his. But I felt him. The heat of his fingers, the steady rise and fall of his breath, the silent question hanging in the air. Is this something? We never said it aloud. We didn't have to. In that moment, I knew he felt it too. The possibility, the longing. But with that knowing came fear. Not of him, not of what we felt, of the world beyond this bench, the team, the school, the whispered rumors that could bloom into headlines. So we stayed, still, quiet, side by side, and said nothing. But that silence? It spoke volumes. We won that night. It wasn't just a victory, it was a landslide. Final score, 42-10. I played with everything I had, moved like I had something to prove. Maybe I did. Not to the opposing team, not to the boys on the field. To myself. The locker room exploded after the game. Voices shouting, towels flying, jerseys slammed into lockers with raw, primal joy. My nerves tingled with electricity, yet beneath it all, something colder stirred. Something quieter, lurking in the shadows. Even amidst the noise of celebration, I felt strangely empty. I washed quickly, slipped into clothes without thought, and slipped away before the group began devouring slices and swapping stories. The corridors were hushed, broken only by the soft tap of my footsteps on the smooth floor. I wandered aimlessly until I spotted the gym, its lights still glowing. He was there, alone, stretching in the center of the hardwood. One leg bent forward, arms extended, head bowed, fully absorbed in himself. The air smelled of old sweat, polished floors, and triumph. I paused at the entrance, unsure if I should intrude. Then his eyes lifted and found me. No smile, but his expression softened, as if he had expected me all along, as if he'd known I'd arrive eventually. Trouble. Sleeping too? He asked. Not a chance. He nodded toward the bench along the wall. Join me. I moved over and dropped my bag, sitting beside him. The gym was still, broken only by the faint buzzing of the exit sign and the distant hum of fluorescent bulbs. We didn't speak at first. The silence felt thick, not uncomfortable, but electric. Finally, I spoke. Think we've got a shot at the playoffs? He shrugged lightly, thoughtful. If we keep up tonight's pace, yeah. But I doubt you came here to chat about sports. My throat tightened. No, I whispered. I didn't. He settled beside me, elbows resting on knees, gaze fixed on the floor. You played like you were running from something tonight, he said. I exhaled a weak laugh. Yeah, probably running from myself. He glanced my way, not pushing, just there. Words slipped out before I could hold them back. Have you ever wanted something that's out of reach? He didn't blink, didn't ask for clarification. He just looked at me and said, every single day. The silence that followed almost broke me open. Our eyes locked and something passed between us, something undeniable. It had lingered for weeks, silent, waiting, but tonight it was loud, insistent. I don't recall moving. I don't remember making a choice. One moment we were apart, the next too close, our legs nearly touching. He hesitated. So did I, everything. Inside warned me this was a boundary we shouldn't cross, but then his hand brushed against mine. Not accidental, not casual, intentional. My breath hitched, and I didn't pull away. The room tilted slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. From how soft yet intense it was. Then he leaned closer, and I leaned in too. Our lips met, not with urgency, not with desire, with fear, with yearning, with release. The kiss was tentative, searching, as if we were both still asking, is this right? Even as we moved, his hand rose to my cheek, rough and warm. and I sank into the sensation like it was the missing piece I'd been waiting for all my life. When we pulled away, the world didn't rush back. There was only stillness. Stillness and breath. And him. His eyes shimmered, and he looked at me as though he saw every hidden fragment of myself. I had no words. Neither did he. We lingered in the silence of what had just unfolded, its significance, its possibilities. Finally, I breathed out, "Where do we go from here?" He stayed quiet, not immediately responding. His gaze fell to the floor, hands nervously intertwining. In that stillness, I understood. We had crossed an invisible boundary. Neither of us knew the path forward, but neither of us regretted the step. Sleep eluded me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed it, his fingers brushing against mine, the gym's muted amber lights surrounding us, the kiss that felt both a murmur and a roar. It circled through my mind, not as a memory, but as a question. What happens now? Part of me buzzed with warmth, the reassurance, the thrill of being desired again. Yet beneath that, deep and shadowed, something else stirred. Apprehension. What if someone had witnessed us? What if the secret leaked? Worse, what if he regretted what happened? That thought chased me through the long, restless hours. I heard silence where footsteps should have echoed. I imagined hushed voices in locker rooms. I rehearsed denials I'd never speak aloud, and I didn't know how to handle the ache in my chest. Not guilt exactly, but uncertainty. Morning came and I skipped breakfast, heading early to school. The halls were hushed, dawn light stretching across the windows. I sat alone in the locker room, trying to steady the weight pressing on my ribs. I rewound the kiss again and again, not to undo it. I couldn't. I just didn't know how to hold it safe in a world that might reject it. When the team began to trickle in, I forced myself into routine, joked, stretched, nodded when spoken to. But I avoided looking at him, not yet. After practice, I stayed behind, an unconscious habit now, like muscle memory. I didn't question it. Coach was at his desk reviewing footage. I hesitated at the doorway, heart pounding like a drum. He looked up, holding my gaze for a beat that felt like a lifetime. "Hey," he said quietly. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, sat across from him. "I'm sorry," I said, though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. He blinked. "For what?" "For last night, for avoiding you, for not knowing how to talk about it." He leaned back, arms folded, calm expression. "You don't have to say anything you're not ready to." That cracked something inside me. I can't stop thinking about it. Me neither. That admission caught me off guard. I'd convinced myself he'd moved past it, locked it away, filed it under mistake, but he hadn't. "I keep wondering if it was wrong," I confessed. "And what's your answer?" I hesitated. "It didn't feel wrong," he nodded. "It didn't to me either." Silence settled between us, light, open, not heavy. Like a door we weren't sure how to open. "I don't regret it," he finally said, steady and sure. "But I'll follow your pace. Always." That hit me deeply. He wasn't pushing, not controlling. He was giving me space. Not just to choose him, but to find myself on my own terms. I studied him for a long moment. Really saw him, then I said the words I'd held back since that kiss. "I'm scared." "I know. I'm scared that if anyone finds out, you'll lose everything." "That I will." He nodded. "I've lived with that fear for a long time." I rubbed my hands together, throat tight. "But I don't want to act like it never happened." "Then don't," he said. "Let it be what it is. Quiet, true. Ours. No grand plan, no contracts, no strict rules. But in that stillness, we made a silent promise. Not to tell anyone, at least not yet. To move carefully, thoughtfully, slowly. We weren't rushing into a romance. We were stepping into something that had been growing quietly for weeks, maybe months, built on presence, on understanding, on trust. I rose, slung my bag over my shoulder, headed for the door, then paused. "Does it get easier?" I asked. He smiled. Softly, sadly, hopefully. "Maybe not, but you get stronger." That thought stayed with me all day. That night, sitting on my bed with the city's gentle hum outside my window, I let myself feel it. Everything. The fear, the ache, the spark, and the strange, tender relief of being truly seen, not just as an athlete or a student or a figure in a jersey, but as myself. For so long, I'd feared the locker room would be where I broke, but it became the place I began.